All right, there we go. As you can see up in the nest, we have the reading material, so feel free to read along, or if you haven't already done so. I'm just going to be reading those 3 screenshots, and then once I'm done reading through it, I'll go back and read it again and kind of give some of my thoughts. Just the same as all the other spaces I've done on this text and others. It's kind of off the cuff, but hopefully you guys will have some observations too, and we can have a discussion. 2.6 Subjectivity and Verification. Nie Chue, Toothless, asked ZhuangZi, Weakling Wang, "Do you know anything all creatures similarly take to be right?" He said, "How could I ever know that?" "But do you know what you do not know?" He said, "How could I ever know that?" "Does that mean that all creatures have no knowledge of anything?" He said, "How could I ever know that?" In spite of all this, let me try to put things into words. The question is, how is one to know that what one calls knowledge is not a case of ignorance? And how are we to know that what we call ignorance is not a case of knowledge? Anyway, let me keep asking you some questions. If people sleep on soggy wet places, then their waists will ache and they will be numb on one side. But is that true of the eel? And if that eel has to survive in a tree, then it will be scared out of its wits. But there again, is that true of a monkey? Which of these kinds of creatures know what is the correct abode? The people eat the meat of grass-fed and grain-fed animals. The Mi-lu deer eat jian grass. The huge centipede prefers small snakes. The sparrowhawk, as well as the crow, have a taste for mice. Which of these 4 kinds of creatures knows the correct taste? Monkeys of the yuan, bian, and ju kinds treat each other as sexual objects. Deer of the mi kind copulate with the lu kind. Qiu fish dally with other fish. Mao Qiang and Li Ji were held to be most beautiful. But any fish would dive deep at the sight, and any bird would fly high at the sight, and the Mi Lu deer would rush off in a huff. Of these 4 kinds of creatures, which one understands correct sexiness? As far as I can see, the principles of morality like benevolence and duty, the path of right and wrong, these are all in one complete mess. How can I understand these logical quibbles? Nie Chue said, "Well, if you cannot tell profit from harm, does it follow that the perfected man inherently cannot tell profit from harm?" ZhuangZi said, "The perfected man has something spiritual about him. The great marshes may burn, but this is incapable of making him feel hot. The Yellow River and the River Han may freeze, but this is incapable of making him feel cold. The sudden thunder may smash the mountains, the storms may shake the sea, but all these are incapable of making him feel panic. Someone of this sort rides along on the vapor in the clouds, astride on sun and moon. He roams beyond the 4 seas of this world. Death or life makes no difference to himself, even less the principles of profit and harm." Okay, that's the end of the section. I'm going to go back as usual now and kind of read through it myself while sharing a few thoughts that occur to me. I think it's basically going over some similar themes that we've already seen in the earlier parts of the Qi Wu Luan. And Unknown, Theone, and if anyone else joins, of course, feel free to comment or speak whenever you like. It's an open space.
Yeah, I'll probably try and you have a source for this, like a PDF or something? I'd like to read it from like the beginning, and then try and catch up here.
Yeah, if you wanted.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, if you wanted this particular book, it's the inner chapters of the ZhuangZi with copious annotations from the Chinese commentaries by Christoph Habsmeyer and John Williams. If you wanted this particular book's text, if you check the previous spaces, because they're all on my Twitter profile here.
They're recorded.
Yeah, they have the screenshots of the pages. So essentially, this book is a collection of chapters. The chapters kind of stand alone. I mean, you don't need to have read one chapter to read another.
Okay.
And so this one is chapter 2 is a Qi Wu Lun, a disquisition that levels all, or basically flattening everything out, putting everything on the same plane. And if you wanted this particular book, all the screenshots are on my profile. But if you wanted just the book in general, I can send you a link to C-Text, which has a lot of these ancient texts. And they're available free there with usually, well, not usually, but sometimes with the English. ZhuangZi has the English, so you can read it all in English there. But with the Chinese, of course. And
That'd be cool.
yeah, so I'll post a link in the group chat that we're both in. But yeah, going back to it, Nie Chue Toothless asked Wang Ni again. He's always got these interesting named characters. He says, "Do you know anything all creatures similarly take to be right?" And it's for me, it's an interesting question because it's almost a question where I'm going to say, well, that's where the beginning of metaphysics or objectivity is, right? Because if you're basically asking, is there anything that everyone will agree on? And I guess putting aside ignorance of metaphysics for a second, is there anything that we could possibly agree on, I guess? Anything that we would all possibly agree on? And the only thing I can think of are going to be these questions or answers that aren't reliant on what we are individually, like that don't rely on our individual perspective. Because like he's saying later, right, if you sleep in a wet, soggy place, you're going to be sore and tired and it's going to suck. But an eel probably likes sleeping in the water. But then if you put an eel in a tree, it's going to be like, this sucks. I don't want to live up in a tree. I'm terrified. If we're going to be talking about these practical questions or any question that relies on our individual perspective on nature, then yeah, how could there be anything that we're all going to take to be right or the best or correct? But I guess maybe this is one way of beginning metaphysics, when you say, well, what is it that irrespective of our perspective is going to be true for all of us? And for this particular book, as we saw in earlier sections of this chapter, it's sort of going to be the unity of all things, or all things being there together. I mean, from my perspective, obviously, it's going to be something like existence, like being. These questions of being, ontology, these are going to be ones that everyone will be able to take to be right, because it's not reliant on their particular perspectives to the exclusion of other perspectives. Insofar as everything is there to be spoken of, we would all agree it's there to be spoken of. And it's only later when we start saying, well, how do we each relate to each other thing, that then we would start to disagree. So, yeah, no, that's how I would take that question. And I can see why he's saying, how could I ever know that? Because it's like on a practical level, prior to those broader questions that don't have any regard for practical or personal preference, there isn't anything we would all take to be right. Do you know what you do not know? He said. Yeah, this is like another huge metaphysical question. It's really interesting. Do you know what you do not know? Isn't it like Socrates says, at least I know that I do not know? So he's sort of saying, well, you said you don't know if there's anything that everyone takes to be right. Do you know that you don't know that? And I suppose that's one of those objective questions. It's not about personal preference. It's like, do you know that you don't know? And I suppose Socrates says, at least I know that I don't know. But here, this guy's saying, how could I ever know that? I don't even know that I don't know. It's like a total state of confusion or denial of knowledge. But that's also like the cynics, right? It's like the pyro others who are going to say, we should withhold judgment. We should indulge in this sense of like not assenting or denying to anything, just letting it be as it is and not saying we know. So it's almost like a cynic at that point. It's like, I don't even know that I don't know. Does that mean that all creatures have no knowledge of everything, of anything? That question's a little tricky. I don't know. Maybe I'd have to go and look how that's supposed to be taken. Does that mean that all creatures have no knowledge of anything? So we said that we don't know if there's something that everyone would agree on. And then we said we don't know that we don't know. And then, does that mean that all creatures have no knowledge of anything? I don't know how that question exactly follows. Maybe it's just he's asking, are you denying that anyone knows anything? And he says, how could I ever know that? Again, beautiful cynic answer there, or a sort of a nobody knows anything. In spite of all this, let me try to put it into words. Okay, this is a fellow that's saying, I don't know, and now he's going to put it into words. How is one to know what one calls knowledge? Is not a case of ignorance. Yeah, I mean, how are we to know that what we call ignorance is not a case of knowledge? I don't know. I guess I'd have to ponder that. How is one to know what one calls knowledge is not a case of ignorance? And how are we to know what we call knowledge is not a case of knowledge? I think it's going to go into the next section, because essentially he's going to be saying, how do you know that this is the right answer when another perspective is going to say it's the wrong answer? So I guess we could take it in two ways. One is, I don't know that I don't know. So how do I know that my claim that I don't know is actually a claim of knowledge? Because if I say I don't know, am I not being a bit like Socrates and saying that I know that I don't know? So I can take it that way, I guess. But the other way is what's going to follow, which is, if I say apples taste good, is that really knowledge that apples taste good? Or is it ignorance that they taste bad because another fellow is going to say they taste bad? It's all relative. And so insofar as I'm right in my perspective, but I'm wrong in another perspective, and therefore my knowledge would be wrong and my knowledge would be right, insofar as we're still talking about different perspectives. Because anyway, let me keep asking you some questions. If people sleep on soggy wet places, then their waists will ache, and they will be numb on one side. But is that true of the eel? And if that eel has to survive in a tree, then it will be scared out of its wits. But there again, is that true of a monkey? Which of these creatures know what is the correct abode? Right, exactly. So I could claim to be very knowledgeable about the best place to sleep, but obviously if a fish slept in my bed, it would be dead by the morning. And so my knowledge is actually ignorance of the best place to sleep, because it would kill a fish. But of course, it's also knowledge, I suppose, because it's the right place for me. So I guess we just have to make these careful distinctions. But then we go back to that first question, do you know anything all creatures similarly take to be right? If we're talking at this level, we can't, because there's never going to be any agreement. Every single perspective is going to be slightly different, or incredibly different in the case of a fish dying because I put it in bed. The people eat meat of grass-fed and grain-fed animals. The mi-lu deer eat jian grass. The huge centipede prefers small snakes. The sparrowhawk as well as the crow have a taste for mice. Which of these four kinds of creatures knows the correct taste? Again, I just like the way he writes, but and the Chinese, if you look at it on the left, is very short. These like 4-character lines. Like what's this? Like the huge the huge centipede prefers small snakes. How you say? Oh yeah, I guess it is. There's a word for snake there. Yeah, Jiju Dan Dai. Oh, Gandai. Yeah, Jiju Gandai. The huge centipede prefers small snakes. Yeah, it's typical ZhuangZi with all these animals and characters and the like. But it's the same point as above. we're not going to agree on what is the right thing to eat, and if we exchanged them, we'd kill each other. Which of these 4 creatures knows the correct taste? Right. Monkeys of the Yuan, Bian, and Zhu kinds treat each other as sexual objects. Deer of the Mi kind copulate with the Lu kind. Qiu fish dally with other fish. Mao Qiang and Li Ji were held to be most beautiful, but any fish would dive deep at the sight, any bird would fly high at the sight, and the Mi Lu deer would rush off in a huff. You know what's unfortunate about the this version of the text is they offer the commentaries, but they're very abridged, and they don't actually have a footnote here regarding Mao Qiang and Li Ji. I mean, I know they're supposed to be very beautiful women or concubines or whatnot, but there's no note to that in this book that I see, at least. So that's unfortunate. But yeah, again, it's the same point. It's just like, here are all these different types of monkeys, and they'll have sex with each other. Here are these deer, they'll have sex with each other. Here are these fish that reproduce with each other. Now, we as humans think that these 2 women are the most beautiful of all, but presumably the fish, bird, and deer would not wish to reproduce with Mao Qiang and Li Ji. Of these 4 kinds of creatures, which one understands correct sexiness? Yeah, again, do you know anything all creatures similarly take to be right? No, they're all going to disagree. But, again, this is the birth of philosophy, right? Or the birth of some broader perspective, because presumably all of these creatures agree that there is sexiness or reproductive urge. This is the birth of... Yeah, okay, so yeah, maybe this yearning or these questions regarding universality is the birth of philosophy in some way, because here we have all these distinctions when you get into the details, but aren't they all unified in the sense that all of these animals listed are sleeping somewhere or eating something or reproducing in some way? And so actually, yeah, all creatures similarly do take these things to be right, namely rest, nutrition, and I guess reproduction. So even though I guess it's Wang Ni is saying he doesn't know, he is sort of hinting at the actual answer to the question. Yes, there is something all creatures similarly take to be right. It's the fulfillment of or goal or ends of their nature. Or maybe that's a little too reading too much in there. As far as I can see, the principles of morality, like benevolence and duty, the path of right and wrong, these are all in one complete mess. Well, right. We saw in the earlier chapter how they said, the rule and the mo, the followers of them, Confucianists and Mohists, I guess. The Confucianists and Mohists disagree, and so they're both right and wrong. It's all a bit of a mess. Whereas if we then go to metaphysics and do something broader, we can see how to unify them and get them on the same page. And not dive into this mess of, should you universally love man, or should you have a closer affinity for your family members and less affinity as you go further out? That sort of classical dispute between Mohists and Confucianists. Or at least that's how we tell the story. How can I understand these logical quibbles? Nie Chue said, well, if you cannot tell profit from harm, does it follow that the perfected man inherently cannot tell profit from harm? So the, I guess, 智人 is, perfected man or complete man, or, Wang Ni said, the perfected man has something spiritual about him. The great marshes may burn, but this is incapable of making him feel hot. The Yellow River and River Han may freeze, but this is incapable of making him feel cold. The sudden thunder may smash the mountains, the storms may shake the sea, but all these are incapable of making him feel panic. Someone of this sort rides along on the vapor in the clouds, astride on sun and moon. He roams beyond the 4 seas of this world. Death or life makes no difference to him. even less the principles of profit and harm. Yeah, I think he is talking of a person who has become, sort of indifferent to individual perspectives, because he's gone beyond the talk of, is this too hot or is this too cold? Is this loud or is this shaking? Do I like this? Do I not like this? And just kind of taking all these things indifferently or unaffected by them. So the eel, of course, was terrified by being up in the tree. The person was uncomfortable when they slept in the soggy, wet place. Here is the perfected man who is unshaken or undisturbed by being in the soggy, wet place or up in the tree. He's just sort of incapable of making him feel panic. All these are incapable of making him feel panic. He's not engaging in this, that's good, that's bad. He's just sort of beyond it. And he can see everything in its proper place as it relates to all things, and I guess it is what it is for him. Again, that's maybe me reading a lot into the text, but why is he the perfected man? It's because these are incapable of making him feel panic. He doesn't get burnt up in the great marshes when they're on fire. He doesn't feel cold when the Yellow River and River Han freeze. He's not partial to one or the other. He's at peace with everything. Death or life makes no difference to him, even less the principles of profit or harm. And presumably that speaks to the earlier sections where each animal was partial to one thing over the other, whereas the perfected man has no partiality, and the partial details are incapable of making him feel panic. Which is also, of course, what we saw throughout this chapter. Again, I hate to keep referencing sections I don't have up in the nest, but the chapter begins with this sort of idea of letting go of oneself and recognizing that everything is together as one in this grand unified existence, rather than being just one's own perspective with no, I guess, appreciation of a greater picture. Yeah, I like the way that ended, actually. Because, do you know anything all creatures similarly take to be right at the beginning? It's like, do you have these universal principles? It's kind of the birth of philosophy there. And then the speakers are telling stories about why we can't have universal principles. Because if I eat apples, it's good. If an eel eats an apple, probably it will choke or die on it at any rate. And it's evil. But then you have a person that the man eating the apple and flourishing, the eel eating the apple and dying, neither one is going to disturb him. He's just going to recognize what they are and ride along on the vapor in the clouds, astride on sun and moon, roam beyond the four seas of the world. The death or life makes no difference for him, profit or harm, even less. He's sort of beyond it, and he recognizes all the different relationships as they play out, and doesn't get tied up with those, tied up in knots about it. And also, I just think this is just a great way of bringing out, on the other note, the fact that even though these animals have different preferences, they are actually universally in agreement for the need to eat, the need to reproduce, and the need to sleep. And so I think actually, quietly, that's also furthering the idea of what philosophy is and what universality is. But alright, that's all I wanted to do today. I've been going so slowly through the text that I couldn't let it go any longer. I had to do another reading. I will, of course, upload this to YouTube, and everyone is free to listen along or comment, and we'll try getting through the text. There's still, let's see how much we got left. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 more sections to go, and then we're done. Unknown, thank you for listening along. I'll, like I was saying, I'll go ahead and I'll post a link in the group chat we're in, so you can see the text.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep,
I like that. That was a little bit different from the writing styles I'm used to. It was interesting.
Yeah, ZhuangZi is very, very unique. It's just full of these characters and animals and then this idea of some sage just floating along on the clouds and being untouched by it all.
Yeah, that was awesome, man. Thank you.
Yep.
Have a good day.
No worries. Have a good day. Bye.